Imagine an empire so vast that it took 3 months to walk from one end to the other. An empire that controlled Egypt, Babylon, India, and Greece, all at the same time. An empire where the king did not just call himself a ruler. He called himself the King of Kings. The ruler of every ruler on earth. For 300 years, one dynasty held more land, more people, and more power than any civilization before it. They built roads that stretched for thousands of miles. They moved entire populations across continents. They commanded armies of 2 million men. And yet, most people today cannot name a single Persian emperor besides Darius. That is not an accident. History was written by the Greeks. And the Greeks had every reason to make Persia look like the villain. This is the real story of the Persian Empire. How they built it. How they kept it. And why it lasted 300 years when every other empire around them collapsed. In 559 BC, a man named Cyrus II took control of a small Persian tribe in the region we now call southern Iran. His people were vassals. They paid tribute to the Medes, a neighboring empire that had dominated the region for generations. Within 10 years, Cyrus had destroyed the Median Empire, absorbed it, and turned it into the foundation of something entirely new. He then turned west and took Lydia, the kingdom of Croesus, the man so wealthy that we still use his name today when we say, rich as Croesus. Then he turned south and took Babylon, one of the greatest cities on earth, home to over 200,000 people, protected by walls so thick that chariots could race along the top. Babylon fell to Cyrus in 539 BC without a battle. The city simply opened its gates. Why? Because Cyrus had a reputation unlike any conqueror before him. He did not burn cities. He did not enslave populations. He did not tear down temples or humiliate defeated kings. He let people keep their gods. He let local rulers keep their positions as long as they submitted to Persian authority. He freed the Jewish people from their Babylonian captivity and allowed them to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. The Bible calls him the Anointed One. A pagan king celebrated as a hero in Jewish scripture. Cyrus did not just conquer the ancient world. He convinced it to follow him. Here is the question every empire has to answer: how do you control 30 million people spread across 3 million square miles? The Romans used legions. The Mongols used terror. The Ottomans used the devshirme. The Persians used something more sophisticated than any of them. They called it the Satrapy system. The empire was divided into provinces called satrapies. Each satrapy was governed by a satrap, a regional governor with enormous power. The satrap collected taxes, maintained order, raised troops when needed, and administered justice. But here is the key: satrapies were not military occupations. They were administrative partnerships. Local elites could become satraps. Local languages were used in official documents alongside Old Persian. Local religions were not just tolerated, they were actively supported. Persian kings contributed to the construction of temples to foreign gods across the empire. This was not weakness. It was engineering. A population that feels respected does not require a garrison on every corner. It governs itself. And a population that governs itself costs the central administration almost nothing to maintain. The Persian kings had another tool: the royal road. Built under Darius I, the royal road stretched over 2,700 kilometers, from the capital Susa in modern Iran all the way to Sardis on the Aegean coast of modern Turkey. Along this road, royal messengers called Angarium rode in relays, day and night, switching horses at stations built every 15 miles. A message could travel the entire length of the royal road in 7 days. On foot, the same journey took 3 months. Herodotus wrote of these messengers: neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor darkness of night prevents these couriers from completing their designated stages with utmost speed. Sound familiar? The United States Postal Service took that line as its unofficial motto 2,000 years later. But the road was not just for messages. It was the spine of a commercial empire. Merchants, armies, diplomats, and administrators all moved along the royal road. Trade goods flowed from India to the Mediterranean. Tax revenue flowed back to the capital. Information flowed in both directions. The Persian Empire was not held together by fear. It was held together by infrastructure. And then there was the army. The most famous unit in the Persian military was called the Immortals. 10,000 elite warriors, always exactly 10,000. When one died or was wounded, he was immediately replaced, so the number never changed. To enemy soldiers watching them march, it seemed as if they could not be killed. The units simply never shrank. They wore golden pomegranate ornaments on their spear butts. Their equipment was among the finest in the ancient world. They served as both the king's personal bodyguard and the shock troops of the Persian army. For 2 centuries, no army on earth could stop them. If Cyrus built the empire, Darius I perfected it. Darius came to power in 522 BC through a combination of political maneuvering and military force. The details are still debated by historians today. He had to suppress 19 separate rebellions in the first year of his reign alone. He crushed every one of them. And then, instead of punishing the populations that had rebelled, he went back to the Cyrus model. He organized. He built. He standardized. Darius introduced a single standard of weights and measures across the entire empire. He introduced a universal coinage, the gold daric, so that merchants from India to Egypt could trade without confusion. He expanded the royal road. He dug a canal connecting the Nile River to the Red Sea, a canal that functioned as an ancient version of what would later become the Suez Canal. He built Persepolis, a ceremonial capital of breathtaking scale. Its stone columns stood 20 meters tall. Its walls were carved with images of delegations from every nation in the empire, each bringing tribute in their own traditional clothing, representing their own culture. It was not just a palace. It was a political statement in stone: every people on earth comes to the Persian king. At its peak under Darius, the Persian Empire collected tax revenue from 40% of the entire world's population. Let that number settle for a moment. 40% of every human being alive on earth paid taxes to one man in Persepolis. No empire before or since has matched that proportion. Here is where history gets complicated. Most people know the Persian Empire through the Greek perspective. The movie 300. The Battle of Marathon. Thermopylae. Salamis. In that version of history, Persia is the darkness. Greece is the light. Persian kings are vain tyrants. Greek soldiers are brave defenders of freedom. This is one of the most successful pieces of historical propaganda ever written. The reality is more complicated. When Darius invaded Greece in 490 BC, he was not launching an unprovoked war of conquest. Greek city-states had actively supported a rebellion inside his empire, the Ionian Revolt, in which Persian cities on the Aegean coast had tried to break away. Darius wanted to punish Athens and Eretria for supporting that rebellion. It was a punitive expedition, not a plan to conquer all of Europe. He lost at Marathon. A surprising defeat that shocked the Persian court. His son Xerxes returned 10 years later with one of the largest armies ever assembled in the ancient world. He crossed the Hellespont, the strait between Europe and Asia, on a bridge of boats lashed together across the water. He burned Athens. He fought 300 Spartans at Thermopylae and eventually pushed through. And then he lost his fleet at the Battle of Salamis. Without naval supply lines, his massive army could not be sustained in Greece. He withdrew. The Greeks celebrated it as a divine victory. They built temples. They wrote histories. They made it the founding myth of Western civilization. But here is what those histories do not emphasize: Persia lost 2 battles in Greece and retreated. The Persian Empire itself did not fall. Did not shrink. Did not weaken in any meaningful way. The empire continued to function at full strength for another 150 years. Two lost battles in a distant corner of the empire, and Greek writers turned it into the story of good versus evil. History, as always, was written by the survivors. The Persian Empire finally met its end not from within, but from a single extraordinary individual from the outside. In 334 BC, a 22-year-old Macedonian king crossed into Persian territory with an army of fewer than 50,000 men. His name was Alexander. The Persian Empire at that point controlled territory 40 times the size of Macedonia. It had an army that outnumbered Alexander's by a factor of 10 or more at every major engagement. It lost anyway. At Granicus. At Issus. At Gaugamela. 3 major battles. 3 Persian defeats. The last Persian king, Darius III, fled after each defeat. His own commanders assassinated him in 330 BC, unwilling to continue following a king who kept running from battle. Alexander wept when he found Darius's body. He gave him a royal funeral. He claimed to be avenging the Persian king against the men who had betrayed him. Then he burned Persepolis, the jewel of the Persian world, the ceremonial capital that Darius I had spent decades building. The Greeks said it was revenge for Athens. Some historians believe Alexander immediately regretted it. Either way, the greatest ceremonial city of the ancient world was reduced to ash and rubble. The empire that had ruled 40% of humanity was over. But here is what Alexander did next: he adopted Persian administrative systems. He appointed Persian satraps. He wore Persian clothing. He married a Persian princess. He tried to merge Macedonian and Persian aristocracies. Even in conquest, the Persian system was so effective that the conqueror chose to keep it. 300 years. 40% of the world's population. Roads that stretched across continents. A postal system copied 2,000 years later. Administrative techniques still visible in modern governments. The Persian Empire was not the villain of ancient history. It was one of its greatest achievements. Cyrus the Great is still celebrated in Iran today, 2,500 years after his death. The cylinder he left behind, declaring the rights of conquered peoples, is sometimes called the world's first human rights document. The Greek wars were a footnote. A distant frontier skirmish that the Greeks inflated into a civilizational struggle. The real story of Persia is not about defeat at Marathon. It is about 3 centuries of the most sophisticated imperial administration the ancient world had ever seen. That is the story that got buried. That is the story that Dark Empire is here to tell. If you want more history that goes deeper than the textbooks, subscribe to Dark Empire. And tell me in the comments, who do you think was the greatest conqueror of the ancient world, Cyrus, Alexander, or someone else entirely? I read every comment. And the best answer might just become the next video.